On a morning in early 2026, the atmosphere in London's diplomatic corridors seemed to thicken with a sharp message. Not baseless rumors, but an affirmation of boundaries. The dignity of the crown is not a commodity to be traded. Perhaps we are witnessing the most rigorous re-establishment of order in modern history, where every symbol of power must be placed in its proper position. According to several sources within the palace circles, a comprehensive dossier was compiled under the supervision of two figures embodying discipline, one a devoted steward of tradition, and the other a future successor. The subject of this review was an entity known as the distant Archewell, where inexplicable loopholes exist. The hypothesis is, how can an organization facing a severe financial downturn, according to publicly available financial reports, a decline of allegedly $11 million, still organize ceremonial trips to countries like Nigeria or Colombia? Data from U.S. regulatory agencies raises questions about inconsistencies in financial compliance. While meager renewal fees of a few $100s were overlooked, preferential diplomatic privileges, from special visas to military escorts, were extensively utilized. The question arises, is this independent philanthropy, or is it a case of borrowing the spotlight to pursue private agendas? Meanwhile, the contrast is more stark than ever when considering the Welsh successor. Foreign press outlets have questioned the differences in his governing style. On one side is the commitment of dozens of actual working days for each project. On the other is the controversial figure an average of 60 minutes per week for a philanthropic empire. In conclusion, the question for the timeline is, the crown cannot float on private trips. This statement seems to be directed not just at an individual, but a message to the future about the integrity of institutions. As clarification letters are drafted and titles face the risk of being frozen in commercial activity, we realize a conflict of life philosophies, quiet discipline or ostentatious display. The truth probably still lies in the secret archives in London and California. And what do you see behind these plummeting financial figures and ceremonial trips? Is this an attempt to protect heritage or a ruthless purge by the system? In the world of symbols, the difference sometimes lies not in words, but in how a person presents themselves. Legend in London recounts that the image of a royal woman silently standing in the rain all afternoon to fulfill her duties became the benchmark for the concept of service. It creates a stark contrast to modern branding thinking. It seems that in the corridors of Buckingham Palace, a philosophical question is being posed. Does the value of a title lie in quiet sacrifice or in the ability to self-promote in flamboyant photographs? According to internal sources, what is unfolding is not a noisy legal prosecution, but rather the re-establishment of a blurred border. Royal investigators, in collaboration with transatlantic regulators, are tracing an undeniable lead, a financial trail. J. The hypothesis put forward by insiders is an entity cannot survive indefinitely under the shadow of a crown if it is rotting from within. The astonishing decline. From a peak of $13 million in 2021, the donation flow appears to have bottomed out, falling below $500,000 in 2022. The silent freeze. Quiet staff cuts and the absence of substantive projects in 2024 paint a picture of instability. There is a strange contradiction that observers are questioning. How could an organization aiming for global influence forget a $200 renewal fee in California? For the palace, this wasn't just a technical misstep, it was a breakpoint in credibility. If an organization can't manage the smallest numbers, are they qualified to operate the vast diplomatic privileges? For the past 6 years, the palace has chosen to whisper about its differences. But on January 29th, perhaps they chose a different approach document and publicize. The message is clear. You can run a business, you can tour, but you can't use the halo of the crown to fuel your personal machine. In the world of ceremonies, contradictions are considered unacceptable. Two realities seem to exist simultaneously. On one side, the glitzy scenes of visits to orphanages and handshakes with national leaders under the guise of humanitarianism. And on the other, the stark numbers on paper alarming a lack of transparency. Observers question, is it fair for an organization struggling with legal issues to continue using royal protocol as a passport to project an image of power? Legends about royal discipline often mention a woman willing to sleep in dilapidated shipping containers in disaster-stricken areas just to avoid attention. For her, humanitarianism was a sacrifice, not a performance. According to some sources from closed-door meetings, a powerful statement was uttered, shaking the palace corridors. Humanitarianism is not an outfit you put on when you go abroad. It is a ledger that you must balance publicly and honestly. Kai. This is not just a reprimand, but a declaration of integrity. Perhaps the palace wants to assert that public support doesn't come from beautiful photos, but from transparency in every penny donated. For years, the palace's silence was seen as an act of tolerance for private lives. But as legal obstacles and delays in response from Archewell increased, that tolerance reached its limit. The hypothesis widely accepted by analysts is that the palace no longer views this as a personal branding issue. It has transformed into a rigorous internal compliance investigation. When an organization comes under scrutiny by U.S. regulators, being in the shadow of the crown is no longer a privilege, but a risk to its millennia-old heritage. Enough. A short word, yet one that carries the weight of an entire institution. The agreement between the Crown Prince and his aunt has put an end to an era of harmless misunderstandings. The question facing us now is, can a humanitarian organization sustain itself without core discipline and transparency? And when the velvet curtain of diplomatic priorities is lifted, what will remain behind the glamorous trips? Let's wait for further developments from the legal documents that are about to be released. Although no legal ruling has been issued yet in the world of heritage, reputational damage is sometimes more devastating than a court verdict. R. The young crown prince seems to have realized a harsh truth. Public trust is a finite asset. According to a senior advisor, the issue isn't just about numbers, but about transparency in fundraising. A troubling question arises if donors believe they are contributing to a royal value. But this is not actually the case. Are we facing a scenario of misrepresentation? While internal investigations are intensifying, another front has emerged: the forum of public opinion. On the opposite side, a subtle campaign was launched. It was a masterful blend of imagery of vulnerability and pronouncements of heritage. Insiders suggest this was an attempt to blur the lines between individual ego and the millennia-old dynasty. The use of lofty titles or stylized crown imagery under the international spotlight raises questions about a deliberate confusion. At an event in Nigeria, when sponsors described themselves using the global titles of the House of Windsor, a serious disconnect from reality began to emerge. Princess Anne, with her keen insight, outlined a chilling definition. There are accidental misunderstandings, and there are orchestrated misunderstandings. A special audit of language revealed astonishing figures. Over 60% of the entity's media materials used language that misled the public into believing in official palace approval. Technically, it might not have violated the law, but in the world of honor, it broke something far more important: trust. The palace drew its final line with a weighty silence. Now, the initiative lies with those who stand outside the barriers of tradition. Can a brand survive by borrowing the glory of the past, or must it stand firmly on its own transparent feet? And in the clash between silent duty and image campaigns, whose name will history choose to remember, the answer remains open. And do you side with strict discipline, or the freedom to shape your brand, share your perspective, so we can decipher the next chapters of this play of thrones? Behind closed doors, royal staff began to notice a new concept emerging: a parallel monarchy. According to a confidential internal memo, concerns were mounting on long-delayed audio and visual projects. Were behind-the-scenes footage from Windsor or memories from Frogmore Cottage being re-edited to serve a deeply personal agenda? As hashtags for a modern monarchy proliferated on social media, one wondered, can a heritage be celebrated when its core principles are disregarded? According to reports from informed sources, the first cracks appeared within the operational team itself. Several former employees operating in anonymity described a tense environment with vague instructions. We were asked to create projects of royal stature, but there were no clear boundaries to follow. This ambiguity appeared to be a carefully calculated tactic. The arrangement of diplomatic ceremonies, such as military escorts or flag displays in partner countries, which didn't fully understand the couple's changing status, created a perfect gray area. Their prestige was maintained without the need for any formal representation. Princess Anne, with her usual ironclad stance, is said to have made a sharp remark: "One cannot honor an institution while actively rejecting its rules. That is marketing, not memory." For the palace, this systematic confusion had reached the limit of its tolerance. Perhaps this is why the Prince of Wales began considering a more drastic solution, establishing legal boundaries for titles. Completely stripping the title is a sensitive issue, but limiting its use in fundraising campaigns is a possibility being seriously considered. A disclaimer might be the next step to protect the integrity of the crown. What do you think of this gray area tactic? Is this a clever adaptation in the digital age? In the discreet discussions at the palace, the ultimate goal established is not confrontation, but protection. A powerful viewpoint was shared. The system has rules because it carries responsibility. If those rules become optional, then the value of the institution will disappear. This steadfastness seems to stem not only from disciplined individuals like Princess Anne, but also from the quiet yet resolute support of the Princess of Wales. For them, this is a battle to protect public trust, the most valuable asset that no marketing campaign can buy. According to reputable media outlets, the atmosphere in Britain is shifting from curiosity to a state of profound weariness. Commentators are beginning to question a paradox. How can one consistently criticize the system while simultaneously exploiting its closeness? A sharp remark in the Times has become a focal point of attention. You cannot both deny the crown and wear its jewels in the same sentence. The public is not blind, and damage to trust is cumulative. You. Instead of being caught up in noisy controversies, Buckingham Palace seems to have chosen a different path, the presence of quiet action. A series of short documentary clips have been released not for ostentation, but to remind us of enduring dedication, Princess Anne. With her decades-long journey with Save the Children, Princess Catherine with her profound contributions to the development of future generations, Prince Edward with his unwavering connections across the Commonwealth. The message behind these films is clear: true legacy is built over time, and with commitment not on flashy headlines. The final hypothesis we need to consider: when the media frenzy dies down, what remains brilliant yet fragile personal brands good? Is it an institution that stands firm thanks to discipline and self-respect? Quiet service, though unassuming, always seems to find a way to be recognized. According to opinion polls from late 2025, a strong wave of confidence has swept over those who keep the flame of tradition burning. Support for Princess Anne and Princess Catherine reached record highs of 74% and 82%, respectively. Conversely, confidence in the Sussex couple has reportedly plummeted in both the UK and Canada. What began as questions about their financial records has now officially become a global reputational cleansing. The real turning point came on the morning of January 19, 2026. In an almost unprecedented event, the royal keeper of discipline, Princess Anne, appeared before the press. Not to attend a ceremony, but to announce a truth. Her presence alongside legal experts and the ethics committee was proof that silence had reached its limit. With a calm yet powerful demeanor, Princess Anne offered a sharp definition of the institution's existence. The crown's duty is to serve, not to impose, to protect, not to exploit. In that moment, the world seemed to hold its breath as she announced the conclusions of her comprehensive investigation into the Archewell entity. No longer vague theories, the report revealed a shocking truth. There was significant overlap between funds raised in the name of the royal family and their use for purposes completely unrelated to the public good. Cameras flashed, files were opened, and a new line was drawn. This is not just a family story, but a lesson in integrity in the age of digital media. What do you think of this decisive action by the palace? Is this a necessary step to salvage public trust? Or will it usher in a new turbulent chapter in the relationship between members of the royal family? Let's pause here before we delve into the transatlantic legal rifts. Looking at this contrast, what kind of person do you think the character we are analyzing is? Please leave. Comment number 2. If you see this as an image of freedom and the effort to change old values, or leave a comment. Comment number 5. If you feel this is just a personal branding strategy lacking consistency, your feedback is a piece of the puzzle that helps us complete this overall picture. And don't forget to click like, also subscribe to the channel. Watch now to avoid missing the next shocking developments in our series on deciphering the throne. Princess Anne's words resonated not only within the historic chambers of St. James's Palace, but also created a global psychological earthquake. It seems This is no longer a story about dry accounting numbers, but a direct indictment of value erosion. Inconsistencies are brought to light: anonymous donations, private flights disguised as charitable initiatives, and a dangerously blurred line between non-profit organizations and commercial production machinery. Although no names were explicitly mentioned, the message was as clear as a decree. All instances of using the royal name for personal gain must cease immediately. Less than 24 hours later, from across the ocean, a stark contrast emerged. Amidst the sun-drenched, leafy landscape of California, an online discussion became the stage for a subtly veiled response. Analysts have observed that a subtle shift in style. There are no financial explanations, no mention of the trip to Nigeria, or any prestigious titles. Instead, it's a familiar scenario of women rising above outdated structures. Maybe putting oneself in the victim's position is a last-ditch effort to protect a brand already shaky in the face of irrefutable evidence. The silence regarding specific figures from California. Seemingly, this statement carried more weight than any rebuttal. In Commonwealth countries, from Canada to New Zealand, a new sense of caution was established. In particular, the statement from Nigerian officials encapsulated the general sentiment of international public opinion: "We welcome cooperation in good faith." But if that goodwill is turned into a marketing tool, we need a satisfactory answer. As questions began to swirl about, who is the real spokesperson for the monarchy, Princess Anne concluded her speech with quiet pride. It seems the world has recognized the difference between those who serve with the lens and those who serve with real hands. The 67% public support for the palace's rigidity is irrefutable proof. H. This is no longer a step backward, but a deliberate reform. On January 22, 2026, a historic document was born, Charter of Transparency, under the leadership of Prince William. This charter acts as a tight net, sealing off areas that insiders believe have long been exploited. Every visit requires written authorization. There is no room for superficiality or unclear status. All funds raised in the name of the monarchy must undergo an independent audit every 2 years in the UK. Any media project involving royalty must publicly disclose its profit model. Service cannot be used as a sales slogan. Service is not a slogan. It's a standard. William's assertion set a final limit for anyone wishing to act on behalf of the family. The reaction was almost immediate. Within just 14 days of the request for financial clarification being sent, a legal battle erupted. According to sources, a legal team from California has filed a preemptive lawsuit accusing the palace of interfering with charitable activities and damaging its reputation. At the same time, on the stage of the Women's Summit, a familiar figure appeared. Dressed in a calm, neutral outfit, sharp words were delivered. The hypothesis is this an attempt to protect individual freedoms or a tactic to create chaos in the face of London's demands for transparency? In California, amidst applause from supporters, a deeply humane message was delivered: the world needs compassion, not control. It seems this was an attempt to shift public attention from dry audit figures to issues of identity and emotion. By focusing on systemic barriers for women of color, the speech skillfully created a veil over the key questions. Observers note that throughout the conversation there was no explanation of the Archewell entity's financial records, nor any mention of privileges in Nigeria. Silence in the face of irrefutable evidence. The question is It is essentially a defensive tactic using words. T. Recently, international forums have been buzzing with theories regarding a tactical shift from the California side. Instead of directly addressing questions about cash flow or the reports from Nigeria, we are seeing the emergence of a new concept: compassion versus control. Unverified sources suggest that the focus on emotional language and the narrative of a woman of color taking on the institution is an effort to shift the focus from material evidence to personal identity. Is this the voice of freedom or a scripted fantasy staged to obscure the gaps in financial reports? Let's analyze the following theories. Why is public opinion so sharply divided? While traditional Western media outlets praise an icon of poise, British newspapers like The Telegraph and Daily Mail raise chilling questions. Where is the line between a royal brand and an operation spiraling out of control? The secret lies in these things. Don't say it out loud. The palace's silence regarding the investigation and accounts related to the Archewell entity is becoming a difficult puzzle for those in the know. Is there a secret behind Princess Catherine's quiet appearances at grassroots charities? If the other side's strategy was explosive speeches, then Catherine and William seem to be sending a message through presence. Commentators have noted a shift. No cameras, no press releases, just consistent service. One theory is that the palace is deliberately building a completely opposite image. Fewer extravagant trips, a greater focus on local life, as a way to affirm the standard of genuine service. Returning to developments in Nigeria, a statement from the country's foreign ministry caused a minor upheaval. There appears to have been a misunderstanding regarding legal status during the visit in May 2025. There are reports suggesting that a private organization facilitated this trip without coordination through official diplomatic channels. H. If this is true, then the royal title was used as a marketing tool rather than a diplomatic mission. This is a challenging assumption for anyone who believes in the rigor of international standards. When the records were reviewed, a shameful reality emerged. Seemingly, the truth has been revealed. An educational institution in Africa has issued a shocking statement claiming they were misled into believing in a non-existent royal connection. Is there a secret behind Fortune 500 corporations immediately freezing millions of dollars in committed funds? There are unverified sources claiming that this is not just a media mishap, but a break point in reputation that no marketing campaign can salvage. Let's analyze the hypothesis of those fateful 14 days. When the deadline passed in silence with no audit, no apology, public opinion began to ask, is this silence a dignified choice or a deadlock in the face of irrefutable evidence? Instead of arguing, the palace responded with an action that spoke louder than 1,000 words. Silent erasure, a short update on the official website. Seemingly, this marked the end of a global brand. Harry and Meghan now face a new reality, one where the protection of the royal gray zone has completely vanished. This is not just a matter of ethics, but a matter of heritage. As one historian observed, we are witnessing William and Anne recreating an institution right in the midst of modern-day scandals. J. When the last remaining ties are broken, even the most glamorous film projects can be ruined. Seemingly, it fell into a state of legal freeze. Meanwhile, look at the symbolic contrast. A woman without a crown, without designer clothes, wearing only an old silver pendant, silently holding the hands of children battling illness. The hypothesis is, are the public seeking the glamour of the stars or the genuine presence of compassion? The space between privilege and independence that the Sussex couple once embraced has now officially ceased to exist. According to opinion polls, an astonishing consensus of 87% has been established. The final act is not a noisy trial, but a quiet erasure from the timeline of history. That silence speaks volumes more than any scandal. This is just a fictional scenario based on controversial events, but it offers a profound lesson. Power may come from titles, but a legacy is built only through transparency and service. This information is for reference only based on unverified hypotheses and rumors/public opinions. Let's discuss this issue from an objective analytical perspective. The ultimate truth may still remain behind closed doors. And you, which side are you on in this symbolic battle? Press 1 if you believe in the rise of new norms, or 0 if you remain skeptical about these changes. Don't forget to like and subscribe so we can continue to unravel the mysteries. F. Some scars never truly fade. They just lie dormant, waiting for their moment to speak. Welcome back. Today we aren't talking about glittering crowns or royal galas. Instead, we're stepping into the shadows to the very moment Prince William and Prince Harry finally shattered decades of silence. What was powerful enough to make two princes lay bare their deepest grief for their mother, Princess Diana? What secrets were buried beneath those public smiles? Join me as we turn the pages of a chapter that has remained untold until now. After so many years of quiet reflection, they eventually discovered the courage to speak, not just about grief, but about growing up healing, and the comforting belief that their mother's spirit still guides them from a distance. And what about you? Have you ever gone through a loss that reshaped who you are and helped you become stronger the way William did? If you have, type 1 in the comments. If not, type 0. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss future videos filled with heartfelt and inspiring royal stories like this one. William once came across a file he was never meant to read. Yet the moment he opened it, his perception of the events surrounding that historic night in 1997 shifted in ways he had never imagined. Inside were overlooked notes, an unpublished document, and a series of unusual details that appeared to link Princess Diana's quiet concerns with individuals she had long placed her confidence in. The incident inside the Pont de l'Alma tunnel was remembered by many not only as a heartbreaking loss, but also as a moment surrounded by unanswered questions. Some viewed it as a tragic coincidence, others as a simple accident, while many felt there were layers the public might never fully understand. At approximately 12:25 a.m. in Paris, the car carrying Princess Diana, her companion Dodi Al-Fayed, bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones, and driver Henri Paul collided with one of the tunnel's pillars. In a single instant, what had begun as an ordinary evening transformed into a sorrowful event that captured the attention of the entire world. The announcement traveled with astonishing speed by 4 a.m. Leading television networks throughout Europe and North America were breaking into their scheduled broadcasts to deliver the news of Princess Diana's passing. Outside Kensington Palace, crowds of grieving admirers gathered without pause. In less than 10 days, the sea of tribute flowers had risen to nearly 5 feet high, turning the gates into a powerful symbol of collective remembrance. Questions quickly followed. Why would Diana, known for being careful in public, have chosen not to fasten her seatbelt that night? Why were none of the tunnel's traffic cameras able to provide a clear record of the crash, and was driver Henri Paul truly impaired, as early reports suggested, when some observers later said he seemed composed? The official French investigation released in 1999 concluded that Henri Paul had a blood alcohol level significantly above the legal limit and had also been taking prescription medication, findings that shaped the final public understanding of the incident. Yet conflicting details and the accounts of people who were there kept public curiosity alive, making it difficult for doubts to fully disappear. The princess's passing was not only a national shock, but also a deeply personal loss that left a lasting mark on Prince William. As the years moved forward, however, pieces of information that once seemed hidden gradually began to surface. Lady Sarah McCorquodale, Diana's older sister, had maintained near-total silence for decades, but during a private family gathering in 2023, she chose to share her thoughts openly for the very first time. She shared that she had once been the person who introduced Diana to Prince Charles, long before history placed their names side by side. In fact, she herself had briefly dated Charles in earlier years. A light-hearted comment Sarah reportedly made at the time, saying she would not marry Charles no matter his position, quietly brought their own relationship to an end, and without anyone realizing it, then opened the door to a union that would later become one of the most talked about and complex marriages of its era. A private letter Princess Diana penned to her sister Sarah in 1993, later uncovered by William, brought several unsettling insights to light. In her words, she described the pain of being valued more as a public symbol than as a person who needed genuine affection. She compared her role to that of someone quietly bearing burdens for the sake of tradition and expectation. References to emotional distance, lingering tensions around close relationships, and a vague sense that difficult times were ahead left readers reflecting on the hidden pressures behind royal life. Sarah safeguarded the letter for 3 decades, its existence unknown, until William reached out himself seeking clarity about the past. More than a quarter of a century after Princess Diana's passing, the unanswered questions still linger not only among the public, but within the lives of her 2 sons as well. Whatever the full truth may ultimately reveal, one certainty endures: the princess's legacy continues to resonate, shaping conversations and memories even today. She stood not only as a global emblem of compassion, but also as the portrait of a devoted mother, a woman willing to live honestly, to love with courage, and to voice her inner truth despite the pressures around her. In a personal handwritten note to her sister, Sarah, Princess Diana reflected on emotional distance in her marriage, the complicated atmosphere surrounding Prince Charles, and the growing unease created by the constant attention around Camilla Parker Bowles. Sarah later acknowledged that she had not fully grasped the seriousness of those sentiments at the time, only understanding their weight in the years that followed a tragic turn of events. Sarah finally spoke out, not from guilt, but after a heartfelt talk with Prince William in early 2023. When he asked what his mother had shared that summer, she became emotional and gave him the long-kept letter. She admitted she once thought it wasn't important, but later realized it was. That brief exchange changed how William viewed the last years of his mother's life. For the first time, Prince William no longer viewed it as a single tragic accident, but as the result of a long chain of painful circumstances. At the heart of it was the emotional strain that deeply affected Princess Diana. The story, he realized, was shaped less by places and more by private tensions, quiet phone calls, discreet encounters, and the constant public attention surrounding Camilla Parker Bowles that followed Diana throughout those years. As early as 1980, when Princess Diana was only 19 and just stepping into preparations for royal life, the connection between Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles had not fully faded. Unease quietly grew in Diana's heart when only weeks after the wedding she came across personal photos, handwritten notes, and a bracelet marked with the initials GF, a private nickname that hinted at a bond she had not expected to find. That discovery left Princess Diana deeply shaken. In later private reflections, she spoke about how her eating struggles began around that time as stress quietly affected both her health and confidence. Living inside the vast halls of Buckingham Palace, she often described feeling isolated and emotionally unsupported despite the grandeur surrounding her. While Diana tried to endure her difficulties quietly, Prince Charles continued to balance public duties with complicated personal relationships, including ongoing attention around Camilla Parker Bowles. During this period, Diana's emotional distress was sometimes misunderstood, and she increasingly felt reduced to a public image, rather than recognized as a person with genuine feelings and vulnerabilities. It wasn't until her 1995 televised interview that Diana finally voiced what many had only whispered for years, delivering a line that echoed around the world. There were 3 people in the marriage, and the weight of that admission shook long-standing traditions. To the public, she appeared graceful and unshaken, yet behind the polished smile, she was fighting a quiet emotional storm. She later explained that her personal choices were less about romance and more about reclaiming a sense of identity, a reminder that even those surrounded by fame can struggle deeply to feel seen and valued. A trusted confidant once recalled her saying that if affection felt out of reach, she would at least command respect, a statement that revealed more vulnerability than anger. In 1994, when she stepped into the spotlight at the Serpentine Gallery wearing the sleek black dress that would later become legendary, the timing spoke volumes. That same night, a televised admission from Charles drew global attention, and her appearance instantly shifted the narrative. The outfit was more than style. It became a quiet declaration of confidence and self-possession, a visual reminder that dignity and poise can sometimes speak louder than any words. Even while projecting confidence before the world, Diana carried private heartache that few truly understood. In a 1996 note to her therapist, she described how constant public attention often left her emotionally drained, as if every camera flash asked more of her than she had to give. When she later crossed paths with Dodi Al-Fayed, it seemed less about romance and more about searching for peace and a brief refuge from relentless scrutiny. The chapter that followed became a solemn reminder that fame can magnify both light and shadow, and that behind every headline is a human story shaped by pressure, hope, and the universal need for understanding. That evening came to symbolize more than a single moment of turmoil. Many later viewed it as the culmination of difficult decisions, missed cautions, and unresolved tensions that had been building for years. What followed was not only shock, but a lingering quiet that seemed to settle over public life and royal corridors alike. By early 1996, Diana had gradually stopped molding herself to expectations that no longer fit who she was becoming. Her marriage to Charles, formally concluded after Queen Elizabeth II encouraged both sides to move toward separation in late 1995, and the legal process reached its final chapter in August 1996, marking not just an end, but the beginning of a new uncertain independence. After losing the title of princess and the shield of constant royal security, Diana stepped into a strange new spotlight. She appeared more independent and approachable, yet beneath that freedom lay a deep sense of exposure. The pressures she once endured quietly began to reshape her spirit. What started as sorrow slowly evolved into a determination to reclaim control of her own story. She stopped concealing her feelings, her public appearances, and even her frustrations. In journal entries written between January and May of 1997, she reflected on a powerful emotional journey moving from heartbreak and uncertainty toward a stronger, more defiant sense of self-worth and personal resolve. She began to speak openly about her desire to step into the media spotlight, win worldwide sympathy, and reshape how the public viewed the royal institution. Rather than waiting for formal invitations, she often arrived at public events on her own terms, instantly drawing cameras and headlines wherever she went. A trusted confidant later shared that she once described the intense media attention as the only tool I still control. What many dismissed as impulsive behavior gradually revealed itself to be something far more calculated, a thoughtful strategy carefully designed rather than driven by emotion alone. In June 1997, Diana organized a remarkable auction of 79 of her iconic gowns at Christie's in New York, raising more than $5.7 million for charities supporting people affected by AIDS and cancer. Beyond its charitable success, the event quietly symbolized a personal turning point, a graceful farewell to chapters of her life that no longer defined her. Only days later, she introduced the world to a new companion, Dodi Al-Fayed, son of Egyptian businessman Mohammed Al-Fayed. The unexpected announcement stirred intense public curiosity and lively debate, signaling that her story was entering an entirely new phase, filled with change and bold independence. Images of Diana and Dodi relaxing aboard a yacht on the French Riviera circulated across newspapers and television screens within hours, turning a private getaway into a global spectacle. Observers noted that the timing seemed intentional, as if the photographs themselves carried a subtle statement about her newfound freedom and independence. By August 1997, the level of media attention surrounding her had intensified to an extraordinary degree, with reporters tracking nearly every move and rumor. Commentators at the time suggested that such relentless scrutiny reflected growing concerns about public perception and national image, highlighting how closely the lives of public figures and the power of the press had become intertwined. Some observers worried that Diana might choose a life far beyond Britain's borders, building a new future and making deeply personal decisions that would once again place her under the world's microscope. Aware of the constant attention surrounding her, she did not retreat from it. Instead, she met it with determination. In a private note dated late August, she expressed a simple but powerful resolve that her voice and her choices would remain her own no matter the pressure. This mindset marked a period of courage and self-assertion, showing a woman intent on shaping her own path rather than being defined by the expectations of others. The night of August 30th, 1997 marked a fateful journey from the Ritz Hotel to the Pont de l'Alma Tunnel, one defined by a string of puzzling decisions, lost moments, and a series of missteps that could have been avoided. Diana and Dodi had enjoyed a quiet dinner at the Ritz Paris, a luxury hotel owned by Dodi's family. The plan was to retreat to Dodi's nearby apartment just a few minutes away by car. However, the paparazzi had already been waiting outside the hotel for hours, relentless in their pursuit. In an attempt to throw off the press, a decoy car was sent out first, while Diana Doty and bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones slipped out through a back exit. The car they chose for the ride was a 1990 Mercedes-Benz S280, driven by Henry Paul, the deputy head of security at the Ritz. According to hotel staff, Paul had indulged in 2 glasses of Ricard pastis and at least 3 beers earlier that evening. Later tests revealed his blood alcohol level was over 1.75 grams per liter, more than 3 times the legal limit in France. Yet despite these concerning signs, Diana and Doty trusted him behind the wheel. In a troubling twist, neither of them wore seat belts, something unusual for Diana, who was typically known for her cautious approach to car safety. At approximately 12:20 a.m., the car began its journey entering the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, just 4 minutes later. What transpired inside that tunnel remains a subject of intense debate to this day. The Mercedes crashed violently into the 13th pillar, estimated to be traveling at a speed of 65 miles per hour, about 105 kilometers per hour. Doty died instantly at the scene, while Henry Paul remained trapped behind the wheel. Trevor Rees-Jones sustained severe facial injuries, but against all odds survived the crash. Diana, still alive, was left trapped in the wreckage. Rescue workers later reported that she was conscious, whispering in pain as they tried to free her. Diana was extracted from the wreckage at 1 a.m., but instead of being immediately rushed to the hospital, she was treated at the scene for a full 40 minutes, a decision that has sparked controversy and is believed by many to have cost her a real chance at survival. Adding to the mystery surrounding the crash is the absence of any security footage. Despite the Pont de l'Alma tunnel being equipped with 14 cameras, none were operational that night. French authorities later explained that the system was outdated and crucially didn't record any images. To make matters worse, a traffic camera positioned directly above the tunnel was also malfunctioning that evening, leaving critical moments unrecorded. The absence of footage only deepened the suspicion surrounding the incident. In private notes, later found by her son William, Diana had written in June 1997, "If I die in a car accident, check the cameras. That will be where the answers lie." Yet those cameras, crucial to uncovering the truth, were not functioning, leaving the questions unanswered. As the media spun various theories, William steadfastly rejected their explanations. Almost 3 decades later, in a quiet, determined investigation, he uncovered many long-buried truths hidden within classified files, shedding new light on the events that have haunted his family for so long. In 2004, the Metropolitan Police Service in London launched an official investigation called Operation Paget, led by Lord John Stevens, aimed at uncovering the truth behind Princess Diana's death. The investigation delved into over 175 allegations, interviewed more than 300 witnesses, and reviewed thousands of documents from both the UK and France. However, it wasn't until 2023 that Prince William, accessing the files, discovered a piece of evidence that would immediately capture his attention: a handwritten letter from his mother, Princess Diana, dated October 1993. The contents of that letter would prove to be a crucial part of the puzzle he was determined to solve. The letter, entrusted to her butler, Paul Burrell, contained a chilling message from Princess Diana: "My husband is planning an accident with my car. Brake failure and severe head injury." Diana believed that the motive behind this was to eliminate her and pave the way for Charles to marry the woman he loved, Camilla. At the time, many dismissed her words as the result of her deep fears and anxieties, but the details in the letter were unsettlingly specific and terrifying. In hindsight, those words now resonate with a haunting clarity. For 11 years, Mr. Burrell kept the letter hidden, only revealing it after Diana's death. Shockingly, it had never been included in the official royal files until William requested a review. As part of his investigation, William also revisited the claims made by Mohammed al-Fayed, who had alleged that Diana and Dodi were being closely monitored. According to declassified documents, MI6 agents were active in Paris the night of the accident. One agent in particular was said to have recorded Diana's every move in real time, raising even more questions about the circumstances surrounding her tragic death. Even more shocking, many of these records were either deleted or blurred in the final public report access, to which William had to fight tirelessly to obtain. What do you think? Is this just a coincidence? Or is there something more being hidden? If you sense something suspicious at play, leave a 2 in the comments. If you believe it was simply a tragic accident, comment 5. And if you're as intrigued as we are in uncovering the truth, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next updates on this unfolding journey. This is purely for reference purposes, only based on hypotheses and unverified rumors/public opinion. Let's discuss it from an objective, analytical perspective. There's a fundamental principle in crisis management. When warning signals are sent too many times without corresponding evidence, the system automatically switches to ignoring mode. Recently, royal observers have noticed a cryptic message believed to have originated from the Balmoral estate. Without explicitly naming anyone, the sharp words seem to allude to a classic fable, the story of the signal spoofer. An unverified source suggests that Princess Anne's reaction was not simply the disappointment of an aunt, but rather the rejection of an institution. When reconciliation efforts are likened to the shepherd boy's cry for help, it raises a frightening hypothesis. Has the Windsor royal family officially activated a permanent disconnection protocol? If this hypothesis is correct, then the Duke of Sussex's return to London earlier this month, despite the confidence gained from legal victories against media corporations, was perhaps just an attempt to knock on a sealed wall. Let's look at the royal family's travel schedule through the lens of a geopolitical chess game. The data shows that just before our protagonist arrived in London hoping to establish a direct channel of dialogue, a coincidence occurred. The Prince and Princess of Wales made a trip to Scotland. The media called it a long-term commitment, but from a behavioral analysis perspective, many experts questioned it. Could this be a tactic of creating physical distance to avoid diplomatic conflict? If they had stayed just 24 hours, a historic meeting might have taken place. But history has no ifs. This mismatch in space and time seems to be a silent message. The door to diplomacy has closed. Meanwhile, across the ocean, a different scenario is unfolding in Silicon Valley. The Duchess's absence from court proceedings in England is not merely a logistical issue, but appears to be a deliberate move. Brand repositioning, images of her appearing in Palo Alto, dressed in a white suit, and without her wedding ring triggered a series of semiotic theories. The absence of the ring, could it be a message of independence? And more notably, this event was believed to be linked to a venture capital fund with the ticker symbol MS, a mysterious financial variable from the Middle East. Strategic analysts believe this is not merely an expansion of relationships, it may be a preparatory step toward a separation of public image. A former aide once remarked cryptically, "These are positioning moves," and those on the inside certainly understand the rules of this game. Let's conduct a thought experiment. What if history had taken a different turn in 2016? Archived records point to the name Lady Arabella Montlair, a figure insiders once described as the perfect missing piece for the traditional royal framework. They shared the same educational background and conservative values. But at that time, the allure of freedom and unconventionality from the American factor prevailed. The system had once hoped for a safe combination, but individual choices disrupted that pattern. Now, in retrospect, the contrast between reality and that parallel universe creates a paradoxical picture. On one side, stability within a framework. On the other, freedom, but at the cost of isolation. From a symbol of liberation, the Duke of Sussex's journey seems to be facing an existential crisis. Popular culture critics have noted a shift in his status. From the protagonist of his own life story, he appears to be gradually becoming a satellite, revolving around larger media projects. Quiet appearances, supporting roles on the red carpet, all paint a picture of a man searching for his true self. The dazzling California dream seems to be transforming into a more complex structure, where the stone walls of the old castle have vanished, replaced by the invisible glass walls of media pressure and performance. The ultimate question we as observers must ask is, does absolute freedom truly exist, or are we simply moving from one cage to another, more glamorous one? Time is a cruel sculptor. On the face of the man, once a symbol of military courage and royal dynamism, now stand the marks of a persistent inner struggle. Behavioral observers believe that the Duke of Sussex is experiencing a psychological phenomenon called identity displacement. From being a force for change, he seems to be gradually realizing that he is merely a supporting element in a brand strategy over which he no longer has control. The turning point in this breakdown didn't begin with noisy legal disputes, but rather stemmed from a more private space, a gap in generational responsibility. As the youngest members of the family enter a critical stage of cognitive development, a serious disconnect in family governance perspectives emerges. Sources close to the Montecito ecosystem reveal that Harry has expressed deep concern about his partner's frequent absences. While he desires a physical presence to provide psychological stability for the next generation, his partner is devoting all his energy to re-establishing his global standing as a thought leader in justice. Harry's suggestions to adjust his schedule reportedly met with resistance. In a philosophical debate, his traditional views were labeled outdated and patriarchal. This was the first crack in the foundations of the alliance. But the peak of suspicion didn't come from words, but from tangible objects. A theory is circulating widely among insiders about the appearance of these untransparent funding sources. Luxury items, from diamond-studded jewelry to works of art, began appearing at the residence without any clear transaction records. When questioned, the answers often revolved around concepts like PR strategy or brand partnerships. But the intuition of someone who had lived in a high-security environment like Harry's began to sound the alarm. Open Intelligence OSINT began to connect the dots. Speculation centers around a powerful figure in aristocratic sports circles, a shadow investor known for funding media projects and collecting global icons. While no joint images have been released, the timelines of the charity meetings and the secret project, 90419, coincide eerily with the Duchess's absence. Consider the timeline. Just 20 hours after such a secret meeting, Harry appears alone in Santa Barbara. His red eyes and exhaustion are not merely physical signs, but symptoms of complete isolation. When Harry attempted to re-establish the boundary setting, the reaction he received was described as a devastating psychological attack. An anonymous source described him as being likened to the weak remnants of an old golden cage, a bitter irony comparing him to the very system he had abandoned to fight against. At that moment, Harry realized his true position. He was not a companion, but an asset losing its usefulness. It was no longer a marriage in the traditional sense. It was a business merger that had reached a dead end. Let's pause the document analysis for a moment and hear from you, the channel's observers. Based on the recent psychological developments, how do you assess Harry during this phase? Comment number 2 if you feel sorry for him. A lost soldier, manipulated and lonely, paying the price for his mistakes. Comment number 5. If you feel no sympathy at all, and believe this is the deserved outcome of what he has done to his family. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the shocking legal developments ahead. Harry felt like a minority shareholder in the very company he had invested in. And as an inevitable consequence of this irreconcilable conflict of interest in August 2025, a final decision was made. In a chilling silence, the legal documents for terminating the alliance were drafted. The reason given was not just a difference of sentiment, but a complete breakdown of moral compass. In any high-level negotiation, whichever side holds the other's emotional vulnerability will prevail. This is the fundamental principle of asymmetric information warfare. Just as legal proceedings were being initiated, an unexpected variable appeared on Harry's personal communication device. Not a legal document, but a highly damaging image. A medical moment involving the next generation, little Lilibet. Analysts believe this was no simple family announcement. In that sensitive context, it became a strategic leverage. As a result, the very next morning, case number 2025-DR-3381 in Santa Barbara was closed and permanently sealed within 72 hours. Harry chose his children's safety over victory at the negotiating table. A painful tactical retreat. The reconciliation period, which lasted from September to November in San Luis Obispo, revealed a harsh truth: the bankruptcy of faith. But even more frightening than the disagreements themselves is the way the conflict is handled. Leaked recordings reveal a complex psychological pattern: reality distortion. When Harry expressed legitimate concerns about security or integrity, the response he received was not empathy, but a sophisticated reframing technique. His anxieties were labeled as remnants of outdated thinking, as fantasy. The image of the Windsor ruins. In other words, his pain is denied and attributed to a systemic failure in his own thinking. This is the pinnacle of narrative control when the victim begins to doubt his own sanity. Parallel to the internal crisis is the collapse of the external economic front. By the end of 2025, the Montecito ecosystem begins to face the harsh laws of market elimination. Media giants like Netflix and Spotify, who had bet millions of dollars on the brand, have begun implementing loss-cutting measures. The reason given is chillingly simple: lack of depth and real-world resonance. The market no longer pays for a good reputation. More seriously, the Archewell Foundation, once hailed as a beacon of ethics, is reportedly under the scrutiny of auditing agencies. Resource allocation efficiency. Questions about inconsistencies in financial reporting are a sign that the top echelons of this empire are shaking. Amidst that chaos, a moment of truth has inadvertently leaked out. A seemingly harmless statement on a podcast, yet it carries the weight of a subconscious confession. Sometimes the person you give the world to believes they are your creator. Initially, the public thought it was a jab at the royal family. But now, in the current context, it's the sigh of a man realizing he's been stripped of his authorship over his own life. And then what had to happen happened. January 23, 2026. No loud press release. No blockbuster interview. There was only one cold, decisive legal action. Prince Harry officially announced he was relinquishing his California residency. It wasn't just a move, it was a unilateral declaration of independence. He declared his separation from all institutional frameworks in the United States to start anew as an independent individual. The American dream was over, but Harry's journey of self-discovery had perhaps only just begun. The consequences of this event are not measured by political indicators, but by the collapse of symbols. Before any official announcement was made, financial censors had detected unusual tremors from the Sussex estate. This wasn't simply a matter of cutting expenses, but a process. Total deconstruction. 3 senior executives at Montecito have received notices of termination. A luxury Range Rover, a symbol of power mobility, has been quietly returned to Jaguar UK without any request for replacement. This move has been described by analysts as a stripping of ranks in civilian life. More notably, financial records show that a complex debt negotiation is underway with representatives of a Beverly Hills media mogul, someone who once provided them with a protective shield back in 2020. Harry isn't just repaying financial debts, he's settling every debt of gratitude cleanly and completely to sever the last remaining ties to Hollywood's elite. A source close to the situation observed, "This isn't downsizing. This is the act of a man tearing down a false castle to rediscover his true foundation." By the end of the week, news satellites confirmed Harry had established a new base, a secluded rented apartment in Hampshire. No more heavy security, no PR entourage, no flashing cameras. The contrast between glamorous Santa Barbara and tranquil Hampshire mirrored the contrast in his state of mind. At his old residence, a handwritten note was found, a declaration of his rebirth. "I lost myself in the noise, but I found a reason to start over in solitude." That is the state demilitarization of individuals. He shed all his defenses to confront himself. While Buckingham Palace maintained a strategic silence, Princess Anne, considered the steel pillar of the royal family, stepped to the front lines. At a riding center in Perth, her response was not tinged with personal emotion, but carried the weight of a history lesson. She recalled the metaphorical image of the boy who cried wolf. Without naming names, the message was about inflation of trust. It has been clearly sent, when the wolf actually arrived, the alarm system was neutralized by the very lies that had preceded it. However, political observers point out an interesting contradiction in her tactics. Despite publicly issuing warnings, intelligence sources confirm that Anne secretly activated legal advisors to establish a safety net. She was the only one who believed in Harry's ability to reform, but that belief came with strict preconditions. But all the royal calculations, all media predictions, were overturned by an unexpected move. Princess Anne's fragile faith seemed to have reached its limit in Geneva. On the night of January 22nd, Harry unexpectedly appeared at a forum on media ethics and the misuse of cross-border information. He wasn't there to apologize. He was there as a living witness, someone holding the most sensitive data on how the media machine operates. This appearance wasn't a white flag of surrender, but a signal that Harry was ready for a new battle where he was no longer the victim, but the holder of the truth. The story of the shepherd boy has ended. Now it's the story of the hunter searching for his lost flock of sheep. The scene in Geneva didn't resemble an entertaining press conference, but rather a hearing. There was no PR machine, no script prepared by Hollywood experts. The man who stepped onto the podium dressed minimally performed an action that analysts called a reclaiming personal sovereignty. The handwritten note in his hand contained no excuses. It contained an admission of system failure. I was wrong about the input parameters, and I was being manipulated by algorithms that weren't my own. That 3-minute video created a digital earthquake. But the real aftershock wasn't the apology, but the accompanying data. Immediately after the announcement, an anonymous source whistleblower detonated a bombshell. Leaked documents hinted at the existence of an unspoken protocol. It was signed at the end of 2024. The hypothesis is that while one side is trying to protect its privacy, the other, the strategic partner, appears to have signed an agreement transferring access to internal royal data to a New York-based media corporation. This is not just a matter of trust. In intelligence terms, this is misconduct. Information arbitrage, where national and family secrets are converted into commercial assets without the consent of the parties involved. The severity escalates when the attached files are decrypted. These are believed to contain audio data recording high-level interactions between 2020 and 2022. If the authenticity of this data is verified, it would mean that the royal family's information security has been breached from within. Storing private conversations without consent is considered a serious offense. Unorthodox surveillance. Faced with this accusation, Buckingham Palace activated a strategic silence mode, neither denying nor confirming. Because in the world of diplomacy, silence in the face of a serious violation is often a sign of a potential threat. The red line. It has been surpassed permanently. The monarchy, like a living organism, is reacting to protect itself. The late Queen might have called this a cold cut, not because love had run dry, but because institutional preservation protocol. The top priority has been given. A dramatic shift in power is underway. Charles is relinquishing his responsibilities, and William and Catherine are taking over the royal estate. This move is reinforcing the firewall around the throne. The message is clear: the door to reconciliation has closed to protect the remaining structure of the castle. Back in Hampshire, where the roars of the California canyons and the grandeur of Windsor were long gone, the man who had once been a prince, a duke in exile, paced back and forth in his quiet rented house. All titles, all honors, all illusions of global influence had been stripped away. He had returned. 0 point. But in that absolute silence, when the noise of ambition faded away, he realized his only remaining and most important role. Not as a symbol, not as a media commodity, simply as a father finding his way home. And perhaps that was the real beginning. Now the former prince faces a fateful decision, the most brutal zero-sum game of his life. Sources close to him describe his mind as a battlefield where an endless battle rages between responsibility for protection and the ego's need for survival, For him, every hour that passed in Hampshire was an invisible punishment. The absence of Archie, 6 years old, and Lilibet, 3 years old, was not just a source of longing, but a disruption of the generational flow. But the paradox lies in this: returning to the war zone, to be near his child, means accepting the gradual erosion of his own self. He is trapped in a dilemma. Staying means fading into historical oblivion, while leaving means facing the risk of being typecast as a villain who abandons his family. The end of 2025 saw the activation of mandatory reconciliation protocols in California. The initial goal was to establish a transcontinental parenting model, where the next generation would inherit the elite British education alongside the freedoms of America. However, this proposal encountered a solid ideological wall. The opposing side completely rejected it, labeling the British education system as a regression to imperialism and considering it a systemic vulnerability. The result of negotiations spanning 2 closed-door sessions was an asymmetrical ceasefire agreement. Harry theoretically accepted joint custody, but in reality he was bound by a geographical veto power. The succeeding generation is locked within U.S. territory and cannot move without the signature of approval from the remaining guardian, an overwhelming victory in terms of territorial control. While one side was paralyzed by legal hurdles, the other made a calculated strategic move on the new geopolitical chessboard, the Middle East. On January 19th, the cameras captured the Duchess's appearance in Abu Dhabi, the new center of power for the super-rich. It was no coincidence that this event took place just 4 days before the Geneva Accords. This was a display of precise brand management. Dressed in an elegant black abaya, the highlight wasn't the words, but the sign language of the expensive Cartier brooch, an item rumored by insiders to symbolize a new funding stream from the Gulf region. Analysts call this jewelry diplomacy. Standing before an audience of financial architects and global technology philanthropists, the message delivered went far beyond the confines of traditional feminism. The theme of women reclaiming autonomy without permission is essentially a blueprint, declaration of independence encrypted. She wasn't just speaking about women in general. She was publicly repositioning herself an independent entity, having broken free from the orbit of the British monarchy and forging a new alliance with global resources. One attendee remarked cryptically, "She's very charismatic." But clearly she's not just giving a speech. She's soliciting investment for a new empire where she'll have absolute power. Beneath the polished rhetoric of the speech, behavioral analysts have uncovered a dramatic shift in thinking. The excerpt circulating on social media is not simply a philosophy of life, but the manifesto on absolute egoism. The quote, "Sometimes love means leaving and becoming your own ruler." It is seen as the final verdict on old contracts. Many observers believe this is a unilateral announcement ending not only her role as marital partner, but also a rejection of traditional definitions of family responsibilities and royal duties. She is shedding her old identities to build an empire where there is only one ruler. But every empire needs resources to operate. Even as global imagery is being reshaped, shadow data continues to follow. The focus is on a powerful figure from the Gulf, hailed as the new financial architect for the distinct Sussex brand. Economic intelligence reports confirm this individual's presence in Abu Dhabi alongside 2 senior executives from House Archewell, a luxury goods group from Paris. The theory that a royal inspiration fragrance line is launching this spring isn't just business. It's a strategic move, commercializing old glory to cultivate new power. Meghan appears to be undertaking a visual technology transfer, draining Windsor's iconic value to inject it into her personal brand. January 20th. 3 days before the Geneva event, a final digital signal was sent. Not an online negotiation, just a 37-second audio codec. Its content is considered a perfect psychological tactic. The best way to love someone is to let them become someone else. That wasn't a comforting remark. It was a disconnection protocol. It rationalized the betrayal in the language of nobility. Sources close to the matter say Harry analyzed the message all night, not in search of hope, but to accept that the entity he once loved had not. It still exists. In that context, Princess Anne established a safe buffer zone. She was the sole provider of logistical support, but it came with a drawback. Firewall strict. Locations like rural Gloucester or Western Lodge were suggested as places to meet the children, but her message was as cold as steel. We are defending family honor, not personal regrets. This isn't forgiveness. This is risk management. Anne is drawing a clear line. Royal support ends where the consequences of Harry's personal actions begin. And finally, the big picture is complete with a tragic contrast. January 19th. Meghan shines in Abu Dhabi in the aura of feigned autonomy and renewal. January 23rd. Harry stands alone in Geneva in the stark reality. No bodyguards, no fanfare. At that quiet moral forum, the boy who had once dreamed of escaping the golden cage realized a cruel paradox. He had never truly been free. He had merely moved from one jailer to another, more sophisticated one. On the podium, Harry detonated the final truth bomb, tearing apart all illusions. I was manipulated. I was exploited as a financial asset, not just by the world, but by the very architect of my new life, whom I once trusted completely. With those words, the curtain fell. The drama, which had lasted nearly a decade, was over. And now, amidst the ashes of illusions, a truly real person is beginning to take their first steps. In Geneva, the truth didn't just come from words, but from encrypted data packets. Prince Harry revealed that the clue to his awakening stemmed from an anonymous email sent via the secure Proton Mail protocol. Inside was the blueprint of a business deal he never signed. Leaked documents revealed the existence of an intellectual property licensing agreement signed in October 2024 with Fremont Media, a California-based company specializing in restructuring crises into culture. Analysts have dubbed the content of this agreement as follows: the transfer of memory assets, handwritten letters, personal diaries, and the most intimate psychological analyses of the royal family. All were packaged into a commercial product catalog, books, film adaptations, and courses branded as healing. What shocked Harry wasn't the financial figures, but the absence of his own name in the co-owner section. This was proof that in this alliance he wasn't a partner, he was production materials. But the seriousness of the Fremont case didn't stop there. Attached to the email were audio files, evidence of an internal monitoring system. Operated right at the Sussex estate since 2020, these tapes record everyday conversations. But from an analytical perspective, they resemble intelligence gathering, intel gathering. One excerpt mentions Princess Kate. Her silence was the strongest slap in the face. This is the weaponization of nonverbal behavior. Another passage describes King Charles. He doesn't understand. The company doesn't protect you, it modifies you. A deconstructive portrayal of the leader. Even more terrifying was the sound of Harry's own voice. A tired, passive voice. Maybe we should stop talking like this when the kids are home. That wasn't the voice of an accomplice, but the voice of experimental subjects exhausted in his own home. If this data is true, it completely contradicts all claims of privacy. After all, you can't demand privacy when you're turning your living room into a secret recording studio. Immediately after the Geneva earthquake, all cameras were focused on Kensington Palace awaiting a blow or a tear, but they received only absolute silence. Prince William and Princess Catherine activated a psychological tactic called Grey Rock, becoming numb, unresponsive, and bored in the face of any provocation. During his visit to Manchester Children's Hospital, William appeared the composure of an heir to the throne. Catherine was radiant, completely focused on her official duties. Not a blink of an eye in response to the questions shouted from the crowd of reporters. However, behind the iron gates, security sources confirmed a permanent change in status. A senior aide revealed the Geneva speech marked the end. To Prince William, Harry is no longer his younger brother, but an entity that has been taken, irreparably compromised. In the mind of the future head of the royal family, Harry had become a living security vulnerability. No more bridges, no more diplomatic meetings. Catherine reportedly described these revelations as a predictable scenario, but her response was a call for maximum restraint. They understood that in this information war, the first person to speak up and explain is the loser. And so while Harry was alone, exposing the truth in Switzerland and England, the final wall had officially closed. He was free from the deception, but at the cost of absolute isolation from his own past. In Hampshire, there were no more sirens, no more flashing lights. Only silence remained. Harry didn't face royal punishment. He faced something far more terrifying, the consequences of complicity. For years, he used his reputation to defend a flawed script. Now that the curtain has fallen, he realizes he wasn't a victim. He was the architect of his own prison. On the morning of January 24th, Princess Anne sent a cool but decisive message putting an end to all speculation. The royal family is not a shelter from the storm. When you choose to leave, the gates are locked from the inside. That's not cruelty. That's system preservation protocol. Harry remains a beloved grandson in memory, but a security risk in reality. Meanwhile, across the ocean, a new empire is rising. Meghan launches her platform, Arch Legacy. The name Harry is no longer used. No longer holding a royal title, she took the final step in her brand management strategy, total decoupling. She strode forward like a queen in her own right. Harry remained behind, with a letter to King Charles never sent lying cold in his trunk. The letter contained only a belated realization. Duty, it turns out, is the highest form of freedom. The story doesn't end with a peace treaty. It ends with a paradox. The one who wanted to escape the gilded cage now longs to return. The one who wanted to change the world now only wishes to rediscover himself. The silence of Buckingham Palace today is not the end. It is the beginning of a new era, where old names will gradually fade from the annals. Will Harry fade into oblivion as a shadow on the fringes of history? Or is this a step backward to prepare for another earth-shattering counterattack? The answer is still being written. This information is for reference only based on unverified hypotheses and rumors/public opinions. Let's discuss this issue from an objective analytical perspective. Now it's time for you to make your mark in this information war type 1. If you believe this scenario is actually unfolding in the shadows, type 0. If you choose to retain the skeptical attitude of a discerning observer, don't just watch, think. Press like to confirm presence and subscribe the channel immediately. As this velvet curtain falls, another veil of secrecy is about to be lifted. In the long, hushed corridors of the world's oldest institutions, silence is more than just a code of conduct, it is a crown. It is said that in places where secrets serve as the currency of power, even a single stray breath can trigger seismic shifts. Recently, insiders and royal history enthusiasts have once again been abuzz with a dramatic theory: does a final puzzle piece exist with the power to upend the entire current order? A theory of a forgotten letter carrying aftershocks from the past appears to be challenging positions once thought unshakable. It all began with whispers of a quiet winter morning at Kensington Palace. Amidst a drifting mist, it is believed that William, the figure bearing the heavy weight of succession, embarked on a journey back through time. He wasn't seeking power. He was searching for fragments of memory. Amidst layers upon layers of archival documents and time-worn memorabilia, a peculiar object emerged. According to circulating theories, it is an envelope bearing the hallmark of a bygone era, inscribed with delicate slanted handwriting, the signature of a soul that has become a symbol of empathy. If such a letter truly exists, what could it possibly contain? Analysts theorize that this is far more than just a personal note. It seems to function as a manifesto of core values, a reminder of who truly deserves a place among those committed to service. In this fictional scenario, the emergence of the letter creates a royal paradox. If those messages were to be made public, they would raise profound questions about contemporary positions of power. People begin to contemplate a potential shift in authority. When voices from the past reach the heart of the present, do those who hold power feel their thrones grow unsteady? It appears to be a manifesto of core values, a reminder of those truly worthy of standing in the ranks of selfless service. In this speculative scenario, the emergence of the letter has created a sovereign paradox. If these messages were to be made public, they would cast a massive shadow of doubt over contemporary positions. People are beginning to contemplate a pivotal power shift. When a voice from the past touches the heart of the present, do those currently holding authority feel their thrones begin to tremble? Particular attention is being focused on the standing of the women within the palace. Could a message from Diana possess the power to eclipse the radiance of those who followed, perhaps even triggering a transition that no royal script could have ever foreseen? We do not claim the letter's authenticity, for in a world of fortress-like stone walls, the truth is often shrouded beneath layers of mystery. In the absolute stillness of the night, when all of creation seems to stand still, it is said that hidden truths begin to find their voice. In a study consumed by shadows and the flickering of firelight, our central figure, the heir to the throne, stands face to face with a storm, sealed within an aging sheet of paper. The snow falling outside is more than just a natural phenomenon. It is like a white veil attempting to shroud the secrets of the past. But inside, the heat radiating from the letter is more intense than the flames in the hearth. According to supposedly hypothetical sources, the letter is more than just a mother's heartfelt sentiment. It bears the resemblance of a psychological map, a guide to identifying the dark zones within a complex system. Instead of explicitly naming conflicts, our scenario focuses on the opposition between the diplomatic mask and the iron will. The hypothesis posits that the Rose of England left behind a sharp identification of a figure she referred to as the carrier of shadows. Words like mask, the erosion of trust, and the Game of Thrones are used to describe a reality that William has spent decades trying to harmonize. Do not let smiles cloud your instincts. Where power is the destination, sincerity is sometimes merely a tailor-made costume. This could be the core message the letter intends to convey from a hypothetical analytical perspective. We are witnessing a fierce internal struggle. On one side is royal decorum, the mask William has worn to maintain the architected stability of the empire. On the other is the echo from the past, urging him to pierce through the velvet curtains. Observers suggest that this segment is not merely about a family. It reflects a timeless human law, the conflict between the legacy of love and the cold calculations of ambition. If this letter is real, it would not only change the life of one man, it could redefine the very notion of legitimacy in the public eye. William folded the letter, but its aftershocks were not so easily contained. He realized that the peace he had so carefully preserved for so long might be nothing more than a thin sheet of ice over a sea of hidden currents. What would happen when an heir chose to remove the mask of civility? Can words from the past carry enough weight to turn the tightly fixed wheels of power? Let us wait and see in the next cross-sections of history whether truth or stability will be given precedence. In the stillness after the snowstorm, when all things are draped in a cloak of pristine yet frigid white, a dialogue across space and time is unfolding. William realized that the black ink on the cream-colored paper was not merely a mother's legacy, it was a silent indictment of the present order itself. The hypothesis is this: when confronted with such a legacy, the heir must weigh not only what is best for the crown, the symbol of stability, but also face the heart, the symbol of integrity. Love is not always a resounding spectacle. Sometimes it is the quiet perseverance to protect values that have no voice. This is the psychological knot that transforms a royal man into a guardian of truth. Imagine a world in which every handshake, every glance is part of a meticulously staged script. William, in this journey to seek the truth, came to recognize a harsh reality, profound loneliness amid millions of cheering voices. The image of the woman who embodied compassion, retreating deep into the garden with her hands tucked into her coat pockets, stands as a testament to the fracture between outward splendor and inner pain. It is a warning about the price of power, where a real human being can so easily be ground down by the wheels of ritual and calculation. The most unsettling focal point in these discussions is the assessment of the woman who holds the current position. Rather than treating this as a personal attack, we should examine it through a strategic, analytical lens. The letter appears to describe a particular kind of influence, a form of allure that is never without purpose. The hypothesis posed is this: can a will hard as stone, concealed beneath a veneer of courtesy, bend decisions of national consequence? This is not merely the story of an individual, but a lesson in how private relationships can become variables capable of altering the fate of a long-standing institution. As dawn broke, William realized he could no longer remain an actor in a pre-written play. Recording every line was no longer just about preserving information, it was about preparing for a far greater dialogue with history itself. If you held a truth capable of shaking even the most impregnable walls, would you choose the calm of the status quo or the storm of justice? We stand at a threshold where personal decisions begin to carry the breath of an era. Will the legacy of the English rose serve as a guiding light or become the spark for a restructuring of royal power? The letter no longer stops at warnings about authority. It evolves into a call for kinship and protection. Before we step into the king's study to witness this historic confrontation, I want to hear from you. Faced with such a heart-rending choice, how do you feel about Prince William is the act of removing the royal mask to defend the truth? A courageous redemption or a grave mistake that threatens the very survival of the monarchy? Leave comment 2 if you support his integrity and courage. Leave comment 5 if you believe prudence and the stability of the crown matter most. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe right now so you won't miss the most dramatic slices of truth as they continue to unfold next. In her final lines, the mother reminded us of a truth that is obvious, yet so often forgotten within fortress walls. A crown may rest upon the head of one individual, but its soul is sustained by those bound by blood and love. Woven into this was a deeply moving message about brotherhood, about protecting those who might otherwise be submerged by the harshness of the institution. This is a profoundly human slice, transforming the narrative from a struggle for power into a lesson about connection and solidarity. Truth is like sunlight. It will always find a crack through which to slip into even the darkest places. When William set the letter down, he was no longer a man bound by the old rules. The letter had become a personal manifesto, a mirror reflecting every doubt he had tried to bury. In a world of whispers and leaks, he understood one thing clearly: truth only has value when it is spoken in the voice of integrity itself. Carrying the letter close to his left chest was not merely bearing a keepsake, it was carrying a moral compass to face what lay ahead. The chosen setting was not the pageantry of Buckingham Palace, but the quiet stillness of Clarence House, where the sounds of history seemed to hold their breath. Imagine the moment a son steps into his father's study not as an aide but as a bearer of a message from the past. The door closes, severing the noise of the outside world, leaving two generations facing one another in dim, suspended light. No raised voices were needed. The weight of the exchange lay in the silence and the gravity etched on their faces. On one side stood the embodiment of continuity and tradition, Charles. On the other, the awakening of new values, William. As William prepared to speak, he found himself facing a choice that could reshape the entire future of the monarchy. Was truth powerful enough to break through the barriers of ritual, and was the father willing to listen to the voice of the departed, spoken through his own son? We are standing before one of the most dramatic moments of this hypothesis, a confrontation not meant to destroy, but to recover a balance long since lost. In the quiet study of Clarence House, an old envelope became the focal point of every gaze. As the familiar handwriting emerged, time itself seemed to stand still. The hypothesis suggests that between the reigning king and the heir unfolded a dialogue not only of words, but of shared and painful memories. One side represents the view that the past is a complex labyrinth, best left undisturbed in order to protect the stability of the crown. The other insists that the past never truly disappears. It is present, shaping every breath of the present. The tension lies not in the volume of their voices, but in the coldness of historical scars being reopened. This raises a profound question: can stability truly exist if it is built upon buried truths? At the very peak of the dialogue, a third figure appears, the one to whom the letter devoted its sharpest warnings. This unannounced presence is like an unexpected chess piece, instantly altering the entire balance of the political board. A fleeting glance at the envelope, the silence shared by three individuals in a confined space. All of it composes a portrait of an irreparable fracture. This is the moment when the mask of royal civility begins to show its first cracks. K. What was bound to happen has happened. A secret once named is no longer a secret. Along the current of this fictional narrative, information begins to leak not through a single explosive revelation, but through subtle ripples spreading across discrete online forums. The atmosphere within the palace shifts entirely, averted glances from aides' conversations abruptly cut short behind stone walls, an unsettling silence settling over the corridors. It feels as though the ancient walls themselves are trembling before a truth too immense to contain. This is the moment when we witness the terrifying power of information in the digital age. A letter from the past can ignite a present-day crisis in a matter of hours. In an era where information moves faster than ancient rituals ever could, secrets are no longer guarded by stone walls, but by the fragility of algorithms. Beginning as a whisper on a private forum, the aftershocks of the letter's existence swiftly transformed into a media tsunami. Observers have called this the paradox of silence. The tighter the palace clings to quiet, the more deafening the echo of speculation becomes. A headline heavy with symbolism appears, a message from the realm of memory. It is not merely an article, it is a direct challenge to the stability of the current monarchy. William is no longer facing exposure alone, but the distortion of truth itself. This is an even harsher battle when the sacred words of a mother are torn from their context. They become weapons in the hands of information speculators. Or the outrage did not stem from exposure itself, but from seeing the memory of his mother dragged into the vortex of distorted headlines. Behind the composed exterior and the emergency meetings lay a deep, gnawing unease. Observers hypothesize that even the most flawless public relations campaign cannot withstand the force of a single emotionally resonant sentence. Not every smile offered in solidarity carries a blessing. A simple line, yet powerful enough to overturn decades of carefully constructed image. The image of William walking through a forest of microphones and rapid-fire questions feels like a metaphor for his position alone within the current of history. Polite nods and carefully measured smiles become his final armor against the pressure of public scrutiny. Inside the palace, a strategic debate erupts, the advisors prioritizing stability, hoping the storm will simply burn itself out. His partner, Catherine, serving as a spiritual anchor, reminding him of the philosophy embedded in the letter itself: sunlight will always find a way in. The true turning point did not come from the press, but from a private late-night conversation. As William read those lines aloud to someone who truly understood a person deeply connected to Diana's past, the silence on the other end of the line carried a devastating weight. It was not the silence of having nothing to say, but the silence of awakening. It confirmed these words did not belong to a single family alone. They belonged to a greater truth the world was longing to hear. In the corridors of power, silence is often treated as a shield of protection. But for William, after countless sleepless nights confronting his mother's legacy, he came to a realization: truth is not an attack, it is a liberation. Rather than allowing rumors and leaked reports to tear apart Diana's memory, he chose a stage worthy of her values, a gala dedicated to mental health, the cause she devoted her life to championing. This was not an impulsive act. It was a strategy rooted in integrity. The hypothesis emerges: is breaking the palace's unwritten rules an act of betrayal, or is it the bravest way to redeem the very soul of the monarchy? The scene is described like a classical painting: crystal chandeliers scattering light opulent attire and the refined atmosphere of high society. Yet amid all that splendor, an invisible weight rests in the pocket of the man standing at the podium. Catherine, in an emerald green gown, appears as a symbol of quiet companionship. She is not merely a wife, she is the keeper of the flame, the only one who understands that beneath William's composed exterior, a storm is waiting to be named. As William stepped up to the podium, the world seemed to hold its breath. The opening courtesies were merely an overture meant to soften the vigilance of the advisors. But when his hand slipped into his jacket pocket and emerged holding the worn envelope, the very nature of the evening changed completely. Silence spread from the front rows to the far end of the ballroom, a silence like the one that precedes a seismic rupture. Drawing out the letter was not merely a physical act. It was the moment William formally opened the door his mother had entrusted to him decades earlier. I am not standing here to read a prepared speech. I am standing here to restore a voice to a truth that has been sealed away for far too long. This is the message every gaze fixed upon him is waiting to hear. As the first lines are spoken in the eldest son's deep, resolute voice, the world will never look at the British monarchy the same way again. This is not an overthrow by force, but a reconstruction grounded in moral values. The truth about the woman who carries the shadows and the warnings about power will now be exposed under sunlight, the very light Diana always believed would find its way in. Together we have traveled a journey from secrets hidden in diaries to the glare of the present-day spotlight. The world may not thank William immediately, just as his mother once wrote, but one thing is certain: from this night on, the stone walls of the palace will no longer carry the same weight as before. At the heart of the gala, when the envelope bearing the faded royal seal appeared, everyone understood that a historical line was about to be drawn. William's voice was no longer that of an heir delivering a formal address. It was the voice of a son honoring a promise to memory itself. I want to share something that belongs to many, not just to one individual. With that sentence, the opulent hall was transformed into a true sanctuary of truth. Every movement, from the clink of cutlery to the softest breaths, dissolved, giving way to a silence so complete it felt as though one could hear time itself shifting. Through the delicate lines of handwriting, a royal world not carpeted in roses came into view, a stage where its actors must rehearse every smile. The hypothesis of foresight emerges. Diana left behind a map to identify the hidden whirlpools beneath the surface. The warnings about the one whose smile conceals intent were not merely a personal judgment, but a lesson about the nature of power and deception. The emotional climax arrives when the line "sunlight will always find a way in" is spoken aloud, no longer just the hope of a woman long gone, but an affirmation of the enduring existence of justice. From a tribute to a verdict on the kingdom media headlines, reflected a shock that reached down to the very foundations. For the public, this was not merely a letter, it was the return of an icon. Younger generations are beginning to understand why a single name can carry such weight, while those who remained feel old wounds soothed by the courage of the present. William chose to face the storm rather than flee from it. The public response has proven one thing: when a leader dares to speak the truth, they do not weaken an institution, they rebuild trust on a stronger foundation. The curtain of secrecy has been lifted. F. No matter how frightening the silence behind the palace's closed doors may be, sunlight has truly found its way in. This story does not end with a single gala. It opens a new chapter for integrity and compassion in the flow of royal history. In the centuries-long history of monarchic institutions, discretion has been more than a habit. It